sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. Hi guys, back here again. Yesterday you were writing a story. So today, if you did not finish that, you can finish that. I'm not going to give you an additional writing assignment other than do a summary on chapter 6. It's kind of long, so just do a little paragraph summary and then finish your story from yesterday if you haven't. And then next chapter, I'll give you another writing assignment. So we are on chapter 6. It's called Sour Business. Sometimes a disagreement between two kids stays that way, just between the kids themselves. But the clash between Greg and Maura had always been right out in the open, and it had deep historical roots. Their wrangling had been noticed by their parents, and by wrangling, what do you think they mean? Arguing, fighting, fussing, yeah. By their neighbors, by all their friends, and especially by every teacher who had ever had them in the same classroom. Greg and Maura squabble. Have you heard squabble? A synonym for squabble? What would that be? Argue, fight. Good, that would be a good synonym. Like cats and dogs all day. So if Greg and Maura squabble like cats and dogs all day, what type of figurative language might that be? A simile. They're comparing them using what word? Like. Good job. They were always trying to outdo each, and look at the picture at the bottom. They don't look very happy to me. Let's turn the page. We're on 44. Each other. My classroom's not big enough with those two around. That's how their first grade teacher, Mrs. Gibson, had described the situation. Maura and Greg are both so headstrong that they have a definite personality conflict. That's what their fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Haverstock, had said about it. They're like positive and negative numbers, always trying to cancel each other out. That's how Mr. Xenotopoulos tried to explain it. Now that Greg and Maura are both in sixth grade, he was their math teacher. And as Greg himself stood there outside the music room on Thursday afternoon, holding an eensy-beensy book, remember that was her version, his long, thin face drawn into a fierce scowl. Can you visualize that? Yeah, he's really mad. How did he describe his problem with Maura? I hate her guts. Now that's some strong language there, people. Strong words. It was an expression Greg had picked up from watching old gangster movies. And it was also a stupid expression, because if Maura Shaw's guts had come walking down the hall, Greg wouldn't have recognized them. Okay. The truth is, all guts are pretty much alike. But Greg was not thinking logically at the moment, and saying that he hated Maura's guts did not feel too strong a statement. If anything, it wasn't strong enough, because as far as Greg was concerned, Maura was not better than a common thief. She had always been a copycat, which would have been bad enough. But Greg couldn't stand it when she tried to weasel in on his money-making ideas. Maura had been a brother for years, and now this. I have to make a connection with you to the word weasel. Mr. Ball and I were playing Scrabble last night, and I had made the word weasel, and I had a triple word score, and I got I think it was 47 points just for the word weasel. Just thought you might like to know. Greg stuffed Maura's book into his pocket just as the bell rang. He ducked into the music room and sat down. Mrs. Chambers immediately began playing scales on the piano, and the class began singing warm-up exercises. Greg had his mouth open, and his voice went ooh-wee, 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 ooh, along with the others. But Greg's mind was elsewhere. He had big plans for Chunky Comics, huge plans, and Maura was going to try to sell her stupid eensy-beensy books at school and try to steal his customers. Maura was going to eat into his profits, maybe even mess up everything. Something had to change. Maura, to be exact, and she had to change right away, like today. Turning, top of 46. But as Greg sifted through his past experiences with Maura, one particular incident jumped into mind, and it did not give him much reason to hope. Greg's first business outside his own home was a lemonade stand. He had sold his first cup of lemonade at the end of June, trying the summer after second grade, and he stuck with it every hot, sunny day all during July and August, I wonder if any of you can make a self-to-text connection if you've ever had a lemonade stand. I bet many of you have. It's pretty fun. The next summer, he sold lemonade again, and his customers came back. The second summer, he started using the honor system. What does that mean, the honor system? Yeah, exactly. People serve themselves and just drop quarters into a slot in the lid of a glass jar. So no one is there. They're just paying it out of honesty. That left Greg free to make money doing something like mowing a lawn at the same time. The first really hot day during the summer after fourth grade, he set up shop once more. His new sign announced, and there's the author doing a visual so you can see it, Greg's Ice Cold Lemonade, still just 25 cents. Less than an hour later, the trouble began. Because there was Maura Shaw right across the street, setting up her own lemonade stand under a bright beach umbrella with a big sign, Maura's Tasty Lemonade, only 20 cents. Oh, so she's underselling him to get business. Tricky. All afternoon, Greg had watched helplessly after half of his customers stopped and bought lemonade from Maura. 2 days later, on a Saturday, it got hot again, and by noon, there was Maura, sitting under her umbrella, selling bargain lemonade. What's bargain mean? If you get something in a bargain, it's on what? Sale is a good deal. Excellent. However, Greg had been thinking. He loaded an ice bucket and 2 jugs of lemonade into a red wagon. Then he began pulling the wagon around the neighborhood, delivering cold cups of lemonade right into the sweaty hands of the people who were outside mowing and trimming and working in their gardens. Not a bad idea. Page 48. Direct delivery was a great idea, and some people bought 2 or 3 refills. Greg was making good money. But 20 minutes later, there was Maura on the other side of the street, pulling a wagon, selling her lemonade exactly the same way. Greg had gotten furious. He looked both ways, and then he'd marched across Maple Avenue and planted himself in front of Maura on the sidewalk. I like how the author chose marched and planted instead of he walked across the street and stood there. Good word choice. She'd pushed a few strands of damp yellow hair up off of her forehead. Again, a good visual. She looked Greg right in the eyes and said, "You're in my way." Greg shook his head. "No, you're in my way. You're the one who's stealing my customers and my ideas." Maura didn't blink. "I can sell lemonade if I want to. Anybody can, like my mom. She sold lemonade when she was little. She told me so. And I can pull my wagon around anywhere I want to." Then Maura had taken a step closer and put her freckled nose about 3 inches from Greg's, her eyes big and blue and absolutely fearless. "So get out of the way." Maura probably outweighed him by 15 pounds back then, and Greg hadn't wanted to have a shoving match, so he'd moved off the sidewalk. But as her wagon went by, he had kicked the back wheel and said, "Why don't you try coming up with an idea of your own?" Maura said, "Maybe I will," and she stuck out her tongue. "Yeah," said Greg, "except you don't even have a brain." "I do too, so prove it," said Greg. "Maybe I will," Maura said again, and Greg said, "I doubt it. Brainless." Brainless, less is a suffix, means no brain. For about a week after, Maura didn't show up on the lemonade trail, and Greg had thought, "I guess I told her." The weather stayed hot, and Greg had been making $2, sometimes $3 or $4 a day. Then, one afternoon, he'd spotted Maura going from door to door around the neighborhood. She was wearing a yellow dress and white socks and little black shoes, and she was carrying something in a wooden picnic basket. Greg couldn't tell what Maura was selling, but he could see the money was changing hands. He had watched for about 10 minutes, dying to know what she was up to. Finally, he couldn't stand it. Greg slipped out the door and ran across the backyard, trotted down the alley, tiptoed between 2 houses, and hid in the bushes next to the Jansens' front porch. He had to wait almost 10 minutes, crouched in the scratchy hemlock branches, swatting at mosquitoes. Then Maura had crossed the street and walked up the Jansens' front steps. Her feet on the wooden porch sounded like a bass drum. Greg heard the bell. Then footsteps came running, and someone bumped into the storm door. Maura said, "Hi, Timmy. Is your mommy home?" Timmy Jansen was about 3. After a long pause, he said, "She's my mommy." Maura said, can you call your mommy for me?" Another pause. Timmy said, "She's my mommy." Maura laughed and said, "I know. So just turn around and shout, 'Mommy, someone's at the door.' Can you do that? Right? So call her." Go on, call her. Your mommy is at home, isn't she? Another long pause. She's my mommy. Maura gave up, and she called through the screen. Mrs. Jansen, Mrs. Jansen, it's me, Maura Shaw. Is anybody home? Greg had heard bigger footsteps, and then, oh, hello, Maura. Don't you look pretty today? It's not Girl Scout cookie time, is it? Oh, I could use some Girl Scout cookies about now. How about you? No, I'm selling potholders. I made them myself. Ooh, that's a great idea. Over in the bushes, Greg had almost burst out laughing. Potholders? That's so dumb. Mrs. Jansen thought otherwise. These are beautiful, Maura. So colorful. And you say you made them all by yourself? Uh-huh. Well, I want 2 for myself. And these blue and pink ones will go perfectly in my sister's kitchen. How much are you charging? $2 each. Ooh, a bargain. I'm going to buy an extra pair for myself. Greg heard Mrs. Jansen walk away, come back, open the storm door, and, turning your page, then Greg heard his favorite sound in all the world. What is that? Money. The whisper of crisp bills as the money was counted out, except the bills were being counted into Maura's open hand. Here's a 5 and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Would you mind taking 4 quarters? Not at all. Greg heard the coins. Then Mrs. Jansen had said, and that makes $12. Maura said, thank you. And thank you, Maura. We'll think of you every time we use these potholders in the kitchen. Won't we, Timmy? Now I want you guys to pay close attention to the use of dialogue. You all have gotten really good at that. Some of you are still forgetting your quotation marks around the words that people are saying and your commas for your introductions. So just pay special attention so you don't forget how to do this when we get back. Now I forgot where I was. We'll think of you every time we use these potholders in the kitchen, won't we, Timmy? And Timmy said, she's my mommy. Greg had heard enough. He slipped out of the bushes, scooted between the houses, and ran home. It was hot, so he'd gone to the refrigerator and poured himself a glass of his leftover lemonade. Tasted sour. Greg remembered grabbing a pencil and a memo pad so he could do some calculating. If Maura had gone all around the neighborhood, and even if every mom who was home had bought a couple of potholders, then she might have made as much as $50 in one afternoon. $50 was serious money. Then the doorbell had rung, and his mom had called from the basement. Greg, would you see who's at the door? It was Maura. She had smiled at Greg and said, hello, little boy. Is your mommy at home? Greg glared at her. Then he grinned and said, she's my mommy. Maura's blue eyes had gotten wide and then narrowed. She pointed an accusing finger and said, you were spying on me over at the Jansens, weren't you? Greg's grin got bigger, and again he'd said, she's my mommy. Then, whomp, he'd slammed the door in Maura's face, and it felt so good. There's whomp, W-H-O-M-P. What figurative language is whomp? It's the O word, onomatopoeia. I wonder if any of you remember how to spell that word. Give it a try. The bell rang again, and as he opened the door for the second time, Greg called over his shoulder, Mom, there's something at the door. It's for you. Greg's mom had bustled into the front hallway. Maura, I was hoping you'd be coming. Mrs. Altman called and said you were walking around selling the prettiest pot holders. I hope you have some nice ones left for me. Greg had gone up about 4 steps on the front hall stairs and leaned against the banister so he could look over his mom's shoulder. There was a yellow cloth covering the bottom of the basket, and the pot holders were arranged so they looked like diamonds instead of squares. Those are lovely, Maura. How much do they cost? Maura had hesitated half a second and then said, $3. 3, Greg said. I thought they were $2 each. But Maura had held her ground. I've only got 4 left, and these are my best ones. These are $3 each. Greg had known exactly what Maura was doing. She was raising her prices, trying to discover the most a customer would actually pay. It was a smart thing to do, something Greg would have done himself. And sure enough, his mom had said, only $3 for a beautiful handmade potholder? I'll take 4 of them. And she had gone to get her purse. Top of page 55. Maura had known she'd just won a battle. She looked up at Greg, giving him a big smile, and said, Still think I don't have a brain? I just made $12. Another $12. Right here at your house. Say, I'm thirsty. She pulled a quarter from her pocket of her dress and held it out to him. Could you get me a cup of lemonade? Greg curled up his lip and said, I wouldn't give you... But just then his mom came back. He hadn't finished that sentence. He turned around, stomped up the stairs, then down the hall to his bedroom, and slammed the door. Sitting there in the music room, more than a year after the lemonade battles, Greg still remembered clearly what had happened next. He had walked over to his bedroom window and watched Maura walk across Maple Avenue to her front door, swinging her empty picnic basket as she pushed another $12 into her dress pocket. And he remembered thinking that making those potholders and selling them to moms had been a smart idea. And getting dressed up, turning the page, and putting that nice cloth in the bottom of the basket, also smart. And Greg remembered that he'd had to admit that the girl he had called brainless was actually a good thinker. Maura did have a brain, and not backing down when he had caught her charging $3 per potholder instead of $2, that had taken some guts. And remembering that Maura had guts reminded Greg how much he hated them. Maura was a tough competitor, and in another 35 minutes, he'd see her because they were both in level 4th math. It was time for a showdown. Okay, excellent job. I'll do chapter 7 tomorrow. So let's do a summary about what happened in this chapter. Just again, a paragraph, indenting, capitals, periods, punctuation. So again, you'll need a writing utensil and continue on. You can just draw a line and continue on or get a new piece of paper. I hope you're keeping track of it. And then finish up your story. I cannot wait to read those. Again, you can share them with me on Google, or you can have them written on paper and bring them in when we get back to class. And great job today. And I love you guys, and I'll see you soon. Bye.